I didn't even say this at the beginning of the podcast like I intended to, because I've never done a podcast before. But the whole goal of this was just to like meet more people in the industry and make more friends. Like there's all of these super interesting, super talented sound designers and composers, and I want to get to know more people. Welcome to the Long Game Podcast. My name's George Bafaloukos.
And I'm Anthony Turi.
In this podcast, we'll be taking a deep dive into the world of game audio. Join us as we explore the careers, challenges, and triumphs of the professionals who craft the sounds that bring our favorite games to life.
From composers to sound designers, each episode takes you behind the scenes, sharing the stories and insights of those who play the long game in this ever-evolving industry.
Episode 1. What's up, Anthony? How you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm excited to get this started. So, like the intro kind of explained, this is the Long Game, podcast about sound design, video game music, all kinds of just game development stuff. Yeah, so we thought that the first episode would be a good idea to kind of introduce ourselves and kind of explain our journeys into sound design and video game audio. So, yeah, Anthony, you want to kind of walk us through how you got into this game?
Yeah, for sure. I think given that the podcast is literally called The Long Game, we should probably give the full story about how we got into audio and game audio specifically. I could talk about this stuff all day because there's been a lot of different ups and downs and kind of like side steps throughout the process of figuring out like what I want to do and which field within audio I want to specialize in. But I think going way, way, way back, it probably starts when I played Kingdom Hearts as a little kid, just because I remember that music being so impactful. And at that point in time, I hadn't like heard other games that used music so well in such a cinematic manner and music that augmented gameplay in such a great way. Like the title screen of Kingdom Hearts alone, you could sit there for an hour and it's just beautiful.
Yeah, dude. I literally saw that theme song on Instagram the other day. I just watched the video like 3-4 times in a row. It's just like the most beautiful song in the world.
I saw like an Instagram reel the other day that was like, you've reached a checkpoint. Just listen to the Kingdom Hearts theme, and it's like a minute long, yeah. And it had like 12 million views. Like everyone was definitely just chilling there for a little bit. But yeah, man, Kingdom Hearts was big for me, but like I never played instruments growing up. I played sports my whole life, and my parents never put me in like piano lessons or anything like that. So I wasn't really exposed to any of that, but I played a lot of video games and really loved the sound and music of games. And then fast forward a bit, I think I was around 16 when Porter Robinson's Worlds came out. And around that time, I was listening to a lot of electronic music, a lot of Skrillex, like a lot of the kind of cheesy mid-2010s EDM stuff. And I thought it was like the coolest thing in the world.
Yep.
Yeah, and then Worlds came out and the album art, the live show, the album itself, it was so beautiful. And it just clearly had a lot of the same influences that I had as a kid. There was a lot of kind of like video game-esque retro synthetic design choices that he made with using like Vocaloid for a lot of the vocal synths on the project and just the synths he used in general. So I learned that he produced that album when he was only like a few years older than me. I think he was like between the ages of 20 and 22. And he also didn't have a formal background. He just learned everything on the internet. And I thought, like, if this guy can do it, why can't I? But I was like a little intimidated to actually download a DAW and start making sounds. So I started out DJing. I think I got a Tractor Control S2, just like a 2-channel mixer. And I would play like parties in high school and just like try to learn a bit about music without taking the plunge into a DAW, because for whatever reason that was just like so overwhelming to me. But for my 17th birthday, I got FL Studio, and that's when I got really, really into music production. And I was kind of approaching my senior year of high school, and at that point in time, my goal was always like, I want to get a college lacrosse scholarship. That was like #1 priority for me. And I got a scholarship to a really small school called Union College in like the Appalachian Mountains. They were going to be like a first-year lacrosse program, and I had started making music, and that very quickly became my passion. And I decided like, this is actually what I want to pursue. I don't really want to like try to do the college sports thing. So I had like a lot going on in my head, And ultimately, I decided to go to Florida State University just because they gave me a good amount of scholarship money and I didn't have like, my parents didn't prepay for college or anything. So I was like very conscious at a young age about money and like I didn't want to go into debt or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I took that route and like immediately when I got there, I knew it wasn't right for me. And I think there was a lot of reasons. Like Florida State's football team was really, really good the year before I went to college. And they had a crazy spike in admissions for their freshman class. So I think my freshman class in 2016, at the time, it was the biggest FSU class they ever had. So there's just so many people going there. And I got a really late orientation because I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do. And I had like the most fucked up schedule you can imagine. I had classes overlapping. I was supposed to be in like 3 different classes at the same time. And I met with a bunch of counselors and there was just like nothing they could do. They tried, they were super helpful, but there was just too many students and they were like, we're sorry, like what you have is kind of what you're stuck with. So I started thinking about, okay, what's this semester going to cost me? It's going to cost me a few $1,000s plus rent every single month. I already have a terrible schedule. I don't even want to be here. I want to be studying audio. So on the 6th day that I was up there, I called my parents and I was like, look, I'm going to be totally honest. I'm sorry. Like, I know you just moved me up here, but like, this isn't what I want to do. And the reason I mentioned it was the 6th day is because on the 7th day, student loans were going to disperse. So if I stayed enrolled at FSU for one more day, it would have like immediately been $7,000 out the gate that I'd be in debt for no reason. So like the next morning I flew home from Tallahassee and I dropped out. And it was weird because all of my friends had just started school and even I had just started school and I so quickly made that decision and I couldn't enroll anywhere else because college had just started. The semester had begun. There was nowhere else for me to go. So I kind of just had to take a few months to like work odd jobs, figure out what I want to do. So I did, dude, I worked as a busboy. I worked at an ice cream shop. I worked as an usher at a movie theater. And then one day my mom actually found this school called First Institute online. It's an acronym for the Florida Institute of Recording, Sound, and Technology. And it was exactly what I wanted. It was an 11-month program. Classroom sizes were like 5 to 10 people. I think at the time, admission was $12,500 for the whole thing. So I was like, oh, I could easily pay that off. And in the meantime, I had been doing the math of like, okay, if I go to Full Sail and I spend $90,000 on an audio degree, I'm going to be there for 4 years. And then I'm probably going to start interning at a studio where I'm not making any money. So financially, it just made a lot of sense. I went up there, I toured the campus and eventually moved to Orlando, went there and started interning at studios, did some live sound work, but really found my footing at the studio in Orlando called TSM Studio. And the way that I got my foot in there was really strange. I originally was going around town just like dropping off my resume places and hearing back from nobody or getting a call from like a stoned guy who apparently was the studio manager and be like, oh yeah, man, you can come in tonight or whatever. Like didn't even know what I was calling about or dropping my resume off for. Just a lot of unprofessional encounters. And I was in class one day and someone in my class said, hey, last night, this guy named John Blanche came by the studio that I was at and he worked with the Bee Gees. He worked with Aretha Franklin. He worked with all these legendary people and he would answer all of our questions. It was super cool. So I looked up John Blanche that day, and it turns out that on Google, there was a place called John Blanche Recording Studios. So I put together a resume, and I said, I'm just going to drop this off tomorrow. We'll see what happens. And when I followed the address, I ended up at this like warehouse in Longwood, Florida, and the address was correct, but the name out front of the studio was TSM Studio. So either way, I walked in. There's this really cool guy named Brent who was a graphic designer there. And he took my resume and he was like, hey, can I help you? Like he was a little confused. And I just said, hey, I've got a resume. I wanted to hand this off to John in the event you guys need any interns. And he was like, yeah, cool, man. I'll let him know. And I left. And the next day in class, my program director for the recording arts and show production program, he came up to me and he was like, you found me. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, I got your resume. And I said, I didn't drop a resume off for you. I dropped a resume off for John Blanche. Well, it turns out that this address that used to be John Blanche's studio, he sold it to a new owner, and the new owner had a studio manager also named John, and that John was also the program director at my school. So just like
What?
this totally random scenario that worked out in my favor. And to make a super long story short, he was really nice and he humbly let me intern and learn under him. And I kind of cut the line as far as most studio hierarchies go. A lot of people do like 6-8 months, a year of picking up food and cleaning bathrooms. And I didn't have to do any of that. I just jumped right in and he let me assist him in sessions. I think I was operating Pro Tools on like my second week with him, and very quickly became a staff engineer, and then spent a few years recording everything that came through the door. Commercial voiceovers, rock bands, rappers, singer-songwriters, like you name it. And it was awesome. But then one day, I think I was around 20 at the time, the studio owner had told me that he got a call from a big producer who wanted to book out the room for about a month. And I'm not going to say his name, but I ended up working with him for a month and a half. And it was an experience that made me rethink what I wanted out of a career working in audio. Because at that time I was really locked in on being an audio engineer and eventually being a mix engineer. And that's what I wanted to do. But then I got to work with someone really at the top of the game, someone who produced for Michael Jackson, Destiny's Child, and Justin Bieber, like all the songs we grew up listening to, this guy had a hand in. And he wasn't very nice. He wasn't very proper. The studio would end up trashed many days, like for no reason. I mean, this is a guy who I was engineering for, and then when he was working on music, he would send me to go pick up food for his kids, and he would send me to go pick up gear rentals for him. And I was just working like 15 to 20 hour days, sometimes a little less, but I was just working nonstop. Like I had like PTSD. Anytime I got a text, I thought it was going to be him asking for something. So I got through that month and a half, and I took a step back and I started thinking about what I want long term. And I noticed that I had worked on a little bit of everything from like audiobooks to commercial VO work to a lot of music and some short film stuff, but I never worked on games. And I've been a gamer my whole life. So to me, it was like very logical that I make that pivot. But I kind of had some unfinished business as far as career goals that I wanted to achieve. And one of them was I really wanted to work at this studio near where I grew up called Criteria Recording Studios in North Miami. And so I moved back to South Florida. I started working as a general assistant there after emailing the studio manager a million times and showing up unexpected and dropping off my resume, and got the job there. And that turned out to be, that was a weird thing for me because I was working as a studio engineer, like the person who hits record, the person who sets up the mics and operates the console. And now I'm going back to like picking up food for people, picking up a bottle of Hennessy for an artist, picking up a flower bouquet for a pop singer because the studio has to look nice, making sure that each studio has 3 blue Sharpies, 3 red Sharpies, and 1 black pen and 6 pencils and a notebook, you know, all these very particular rules, and making sure that everything is perfect across a 7-room facility as the only general assistant at all times. And it was just like high stress every single day. It would be like, Anuel is in Studio A, Lil Wayne's in Studio D, Rosalia's in Studio C. Like, it was just, there was a lot riding on every session, it felt like. And the more that I worked in an environment like that, the more I saw things that didn't align with like what I wanted out of a career. Like I saw certain assistant engineers sabotaging other engineers' sessions so that they could step in and look good. There was one time where there were 2 artists working on what ended up being a big album, and out of nowhere during the session, a mic was unplugged, or they lost signal, and they didn't know that a microphone cable was unplugged. And one of the assistants just came in and was like, "Oh man, it was just this XLR cable. Like that was the only issue." And it made him look like the guy who figured out the solution right away. And it made the engineer look like a dumbass in that situation when he had done nothing wrong. So it was just like little crazy microaggressions like that were going on so that people could build up a rapport with the major artists and look good in front of them. And frankly, I thought it was like really toxic and not what I wanted. So I did that for a few months and ultimately was like, this isn't it. It was the end of 2020. So like COVID was crazy. All the remote jobs in the world finally opened up. So it was like, if there was ever a time to pivot towards games, that was the time to do it. So I quit that job and I took a WISE implementation course at the School of Video Game Audio, and then started working at Formosa Interactive, doing a lot of dialogue editorial and mastering. And that was awesome, but I kind of wanted to grow more technically. And after that contract, I joined EA as an audio artist, working on the FIFA games and what's now EA Sports FC, doing a lot of technical implementation, interacting with vendors across the world from Vancouver to London to Romania to Germany, overseeing a lot of the speech pipeline and a whole lot of fun stuff with commentary databasing and a lot of technical work. And then after that, because of you, George, I joined Way Forward. Got to do a lot of fun sound design on some indie games. And yeah, that kind of leads me to today. That's the past 6.5 years in a nutshell. But yeah, man, tell me about your journey, because I'm sure you've got a lot of similar kind of ups and downs that you experienced.
Man, it's bizarre how similar some of the things that happened to us and kind of led us into this industry are for me as well. Like, I didn't know you DJ'd.
Yeah, very, very early. Like I listened to a ton of electronic music from the ages of like 11 or 12 to 17 was kind of like the peak of it for me. And it was just like, I'd play a lot of house parties and I was always kind of subtly sneaking in the music that I liked that maybe wouldn't have been, the songs to play at a party, but I was always kind of like relentless about playing what I was interested in. But yeah, that was just a very, very short-lived phase of my life.
Dude, I DJ'd for years. That's kind of what led me into liking sound design, just like producing electronic music and learning how to use Massive and FM8 and all of that stuff. So that's super interesting. I didn't know that. But yeah, there's a couple things that, like, Skrillex definitely was part of what got me into electronic music and then sound design later on. But starting from the beginning for me, I've always been into music. I started playing guitar when I was 10, I believe. And then I was in kind of like metalcore bands all throughout high school, played guitar in one band, and then did like vocals in two others. And then I ended up quitting my last band because of, band politics and things that kind of happened that I was upset about. And that was around the same time that Skrillex was kind of popping off, 2011, 2012. And I just got really interested in making like dubstep. So yeah, I found I think I did like the FL Studio trial for a little while and learned how to make like wobble basses and, just basically learned everything I knew from YouTube. And that still kind of translates today, thanks to all these awesome sound designers that take the time to make these videos and tutorials and stuff. But yeah, so did that for a while. And that was right around when I was graduating high school. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I thought, okay, maybe I could record bands. I'm always into music, thought that would be cool. So I didn't really have the grades for scholarships or anything like that. I wasn't a bad student, but, B's, some C's. So I knew that that wasn't really an option to get a scholarship to go out of state or do anything like that. And ASU is kind of a party school. It's not really known for audio, really. So there's a community college in Scottsdale Community College, that I had heard. I talked to the counselor in my high school, and she said, oh yeah, if you're interested in audio engineering, like you got to go to SCC. And I heard this. I'm not sure if it's a rumor or not, but apparently they have a really good film program, which I learned later on going there. It's an excellent film program. But I think Steven Spielberg funded it or funds it.
And that's the Scottsdale Community College, right? SCC?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So I went there. Didn't, don't really come from money, like not having a scholarship, not wanting to take out loans like you. I ended up just taking my sweet time in college. I took 2 classes a semester, Took me 4 years to get my associate's degree. I was working odd jobs the whole time, like you, like worked at Bed Bath and Beyond. I did landscaping. I did pool cleaning. I worked for this company called the Game Truck. That's like a big, like 30-foot trailer with 5 TVs in it and every video game console that exists in almost every game. So I'd drive this big truck to somebody's birthday party, basically, and load these kids in there and let them play Minecraft and stuff like that. And they did like laser tag and do like high school grad nights and things like that. But yeah, lots of like odd jobs while I was in school. So took my sweet time. I had a lot of great teachers, and I took all of like the film sound design classes at the very end. That was kind of the order of the program. You'd take, DAW 1, DAW 2, Studio 1, 2, 3, and then there are all these kind of sound design for film classes. And one of my teachers, this guy, Sam Esparza, who is a mentor of mine and just a really, really cool dude. He taught the film sound class and, kind of learned about Foley, learned about cutting to film, like cutting sound effects to film, like time code and how all of that stuff works. And I thought that was super interesting. And in the time I was in college taking the studio classes, I realized I didn't really like recording bands, dealing with a lot of egos, a lot of conflicting opinions. And it just wasn't really for me. So at that point, I decided, okay, maybe I'll work in film. I could, do sound design. That sounds like fun. So I took his class, and that was one of the last classes I took. And like after that class was over, he said, okay, well, you guys are no longer my students now. So if you want to come to my studio on Thursday next week, I have the night off. I'll show you all around the facility. We can look at microphones, I can show you some of the projects I've been working on, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, hell yeah, I'll be there. And I was the only one that came out of my entire class.
That's amazing, because it's like you're in school to do the thing and you get a free opportunity to see someone who does the thing and learn from them. And you're the only one that showed up.
I know, it blew my mind because there were people in that class that like seemed really into it, like hungry, But I was the only one there. So I had him and his studio to myself for like 4 hours. Like we just hung out, we just talked. We talked about everything you could think of, And he's just like a really, really cool, generous dude. And at the end of the night, I'm just like, hey man, I need to do an internship to get my degree. And I know if I go through the school, they're just going to shoot me over to one of these studios. I'm going to be recording bands. And that's just not really what I want to do. Like, could I intern with you? And he's like, yeah, of course. Just get me like the paperwork. I'll sign it. You can come over here. I think I went 3 days a week for a semester. And at that point in time, I was cleaning pools. I had just moved out into my first apartment and kind of situated it with my boss there where I could start a little bit early, work till about noon, and then I would just haul ass home, take a shower, go straight to the studio, and then I'd be there till 6 or something. And so he owned this studio called Big U Music and Sound Design. He's kind of like a ad man, or like what he calls himself, which, that job doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, it does, but it's all kind of like the people that do it are the people that do it. And there's not that many jobs going around. But, he had all these relationships that he'd built over his entire career. So, we did all of the sound design, all of the voiceover for like Phoenix Suns, the Coyotes. We did a bunch of like NASCAR spots. We did McDonald's. We did like an advertisement campaign for that movie Coco, the Disney movie, like a bunch of stuff like that. We did a lot of like VO narration and like ADR, which was really interesting to kind of learn. But yeah, so it was kind of like a post studio, and I was really, really grateful to get that like before I even technically graduated. Then I had like one more class. It was like a surround sound class. Scottsdale didn't offer it. So I had to go to Mesa Community College. And turns out that the guy that taught the class, Dimitri Sanas, used to play Greek music with my dad. My dad was in a Greek band my whole life. And yeah, so they've known each other for like 30 years. Uh, Funny thing, he said the first day I came into class, he's just like, Bafaloukos, you're Harry's son. He was like at my graduation party for high school. And I was like, yeah, like you're actually the reason why I went into this, like, talking to you that night. He was just like, dude, your dad came in to record years ago, and I still have like a reverb chain that I used for him because he just kept saying, I want more reverb, I want more. And it's just the most ridiculously washed out reverb he's ever used. He's like, I just keep it because it's hilarious. But yeah, so that was cool. And knowing him kind of gave me this cool flexibility because by that time I had already worked on some short films, just like kids I knew from high school that were studying film at ASU or NAU. And I liked it, but these films, they're making them with maybe $3,000, and that's all going to paying their actors and renting their equipment and stuff. So, I'd work on a 15, 20-minute film for a month and get paid like $400, So not the most lucrative career. And, to really break into film, and you kind of got to move to California and, one of these big film hubs and get to know people and network. And I just wasn't very interested in moving. I like Arizona. So during that last class, I asked my teacher, I'm like, hey, I'm pretty interested in video games. Would you mind if I do that for my final project instead of a surround redesign? And he's like, yeah, totally. So I redid the entire Limbo Wise demo for my final project.
It's a bold choice because that game sounds so good. That's been like a benchmark for years, and so many people have since decided to take on a similar approach, especially for like final school projects. I think you see Limbo a lot now, or you did. It's kind of past now,
right,
with some time, but there was like several years where Limbo was the game to redesign and reimplement audio for.
Totally. And yeah, I mean, it was kind of bold thinking back on it now. Like, that's one of the best like game soundtracks of all time. Like, but I didn't really realize that, you don't want to be doing the same thing as everybody else when you're, making a reel. I wasn't even really thinking about making a reel at that point. I was just like trying to learn Wise and just thought that, the nonlinear stuff was just so cool and interesting. So yeah, I actually did that entire level from the player sounds to the boss, the spider at the end, and all the ambience and everything. And it was really fun. And yeah, so I mean, by then I had the bug, and so I graduate college. I live in Arizona. There's not really any game scene out here whatsoever, but I had been on Twitter for a little while, and I was just kind of trying to meet people, but just trying to make friends, really, because I think like the business cardy, transactional networking style is just kind of gross. And yeah, I just don't think it gets you anywhere in the end. It just kind of makes people can smell it. So yeah, I just kind of like talking to people, liking people's posts. That's how you and I met. I think we were just talking about like making sound libraries because neither of us had ever done it and we were interested in it. And like this is kind of where things like stagnated for me for a while, despite every effort of it not. Like, I really appreciate, like you mentioned, like, you were just showing up at studios with your resume just in person. Like, I mean, that just takes a lot of balls. And yeah, I was not doing that. I was way more timid. And I think I kind of shot myself in the foot with the way that I was kind of protective of showing like works in progress. Like I didn't want people to judge me on things that I didn't feel like were finished. And to anybody out there looking to break into the industry, share your work, ask for feedback. Doesn't matter if it's done or not. You will get so much better, so much faster if you are just engaging with other people and taking their advice. Because, I mean, God, it just helps so, so much not to be in your own, little echo chamber.
Yeah, and I think that also mirrors kind of like the actual development process too, because there's so many times where you just have to get temp sounds into the game quickly. And if you're so worried about perfecting it, and these aren't even sounds that are going to be final, you're wasting your time. And it's better to fail early and fail often so that you can instantly kind of recalibrate the path that you're on and align yourself in the right direction. Because if you're so worried about showing this work in progress, like at some point it's going to be judged by the rest of the audio team, the audio lead, the creative directors on the project, or that data is just going to get in the build and then maybe VFX people are going to be talking about it. Like you have to get that out of your system early, because even at the highest level, like people make mistakes, or maybe they don't even make mistakes, but they just go down the wrong path and they need to be steered in line with the project. And that just takes time. But yeah, it's a great piece of advice. Just learn to like make mistakes early. Don't think too much about your early designs, and know that things are going to change throughout the process.
100%, dude. I could not agree with that more. Like, and just kind of piggybacking off of that, like I just got a new laptop the other day, and I'm going through my hard drive and I'm installing my plugins and, kind of getting my Reaper template set up and all of this stuff. And I saw a demo reel that I had cut together in probably 2018, somewhere around there. And dude, it was just like, it was awful. Like I was shocked at like that I was applying for jobs with that reel. And at the time, that was the best I'd ever done. That was the best work I'd ever made. So it's just like being able to zoom out after having gotten my foot in the door, having some experience, going back and forth with audio directors and colleagues and friends, and getting solid advice. Like, I mean, it is night and day how much better I've gotten in that amount of time. So yeah, just like fail fast and get used to that feeling, and you're going to get so much more out of it, and you'll meet a lot of friends in the meantime. So yeah, I was just kind of like wading in the water, trying to figure out how to get a job. And yeah, I also went to the School of Video Game Audio for one semester. I took the Unreal class, and then I was really focusing on like technical sound design, because I just wanted to learn how to get the sounds in the game. I wanted to figure out the implementation. So there was like this guy on YouTube called Mix and Jam, and he would make these like Unity games where he was taking like the stasis mechanic from Breath of the Wild, or like a warp strike from Final Fantasy, and recreating it in Unity. But it was awesome because he released all the project files for free, like on GitHub. So I actually saw these while I was going through my, setting up my laptop as well. I made like a technical reel with a bunch of those games, but it was like a Unity and Wise demo with my sound design. And I thought that was super interesting. I took that Unreal class, and then I hope I don't say his name wrong, Juuso Tolinen, awesome sound designer. I think
he's at PlayStation, right?
I think so. Like, I know he worked like Helldivers and I think Returnal. He's awesome. But I kept seeing these things on Twitter that he was making, but he like built his own level in Unreal and would do these really cool, pretty complex implementation systems. Like he would do like physics for like body falls, and like he made this level where he was like a knight, and like you walked into the water, and like the footsteps and like the water sound effects changed based on the depth that you were in. Like it would be different if you're walking at it with your feet than if you were like waist deep in the water, and just like these really cool Unreal systems. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try and do that. So using like Unreal free marketplace assets that I had downloaded, I made like this little first person shooter game. And it was really, really simple. It was just like, your hands, you had like a rifle, and then you could switch to a pistol. And then I had like some very basic AI. Like I'd have a couple characters in the level that would turn to face you. And then when you got into a certain distance, they would shoot at you. It would deal damage. You could deal damage to them, and then they would ragdoll when you killed them and stuff. And that taught me a ton. Like I think learning like a holistic game design approach is a really good idea, because you'll be able to talk to programmers a lot easier and explain what you need or what the problem is when you're trying to implement audio. So I did that, and that actually got me my first quote unquote job It wasn't paid, but this was a huge opportunity. I got this gig working on this fan project called Memoria Project. And the only reason I got it was because I knew Unreal, like native Unreal, no middleware. And this was like a game jam, but like on steroids. It was people from Riot, people from Blizzard, people from Sucker Punch, people from all these massive AAA studios just working on a remake of Final Fantasy IX. And it was amazing. Like I got to be friends with all of these amazing developers, animators, character artists, level artists, people all over the world. And that was a really big deal because when it came out, like the people that like Final Fantasy IX are somewhat of a minority, but they are loud and they really, really love that game because it's so different than a lot of the other games in that series. And I mean, I don't know what it's at now. I think the last time I saw it, we just released it as a proof of concept, so Square Enix wouldn't cease and desist, but they didn't. And we put it on YouTube as a non-playable game, but like a showcase, and millions of views. I think it's over 2 million now. And I got a lead sound designer credit on that because I dedicated the most time to it because I didn't have another job. All of these other people had full-time jobs at AAA studios, and this was my main focus. So that was a really big deal. And then from there, I came across, I think on the Game Audio Slack, somebody looking for a sound designer. And I sent the resume, and then my soon-to-be manager, Kareem, emailed me and asked if I knew Unreal, if I knew Wise, this and that. And I said, yeah, I had an interview, went really well. And then they asked me if I wanted to join their studio chapter 4 part-time. So I was working 2 or 3 days a week on this game called Star Atlas that they were contracting. And that was really cool. It was a cool game. It's kind of like a Star Citizen style AAA game. And I got to do a ton of like cool sci-fi vehicle sound design. And lots of really cool stuff on that game, but it was a crypto game. Like the ships were like NFTs. And I just am not really about that. So I knew that it was a great experience. Like I knew that this was like a really good thing to have on my resume, but definitely not the kind of game I wanted to be working on long term. So, I was just kind of like putting feelers out there, interviewed with a handful of other studios I won't name just because it didn't work out. It wasn't bad or anything, but sometimes the interview process, things happen, things fall apart. And then, similar to how I just reached out to you when we needed some help at Way Forward, Ian reached out to me, Ian Struther, and same thing, just been friends from Twitter, DM every now and then. And he just DM'd me and said, hey man, you looking for work? And I said, yes. And and then we got on a call like the Wednesday after he DM'd me, and it was just me, him, and Tommy. I'd never met Tommy before. And then I had an interview that Friday, and then I started working that Monday. It was just like the fastest interview process I've ever been through. And I've been at Way Forward since then. Yeah, that's kind of the overview.
There are definitely a lot of parallels between everything from like dubstep influencing you when you were younger. Like it also influenced me a lot. And now that you mention it explicitly, I can hear it a lot in your sound design.
Yeah, it definitely still pokes through. Like, cause that's how I learned, like that's how I learned synthesis, was making like neuro basses and stuff. And I still use that kind of stuff in my sound design all the time.
Totally. Yeah. All those textures are so useful in sound design. Like I think there's so many skills that you can bring over from like the music world into sound design and vice versa. And I don't think it's spoken about enough. I think a lot of times music and sound design get compartmentalized a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's like you either do music or you do sound design. And it's at the AAA level, at least, sometimes it's kind of frowned upon if you're not doubling down and specializing on one or the other. But I mean, I think they're useful skills in any event. And I can totally hear it in your sound design. You have a very modern, punchy sound, very much in line with like the heavily compressed dubstep sound, very punchy in your face. And yeah, I just think it's cool how these parts of like our early youth or childhood kind of express themselves in our work later in life.
Totally.
I've never thought about it really until now, but pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's honestly never occurred to me either. But it's cool to see the kind of parallels and where we kind of like deviate and then come back to the same kind of like process. Like it took a long time to get into this industry for me. And I mean, like you're what, 26?
I'm 26, yeah.
Yeah, dude, you're a lot younger than me. I just turned 30 and like you've got so much experience already. It's pretty wild just how you just hustled and you got in there.
I just made the poor decision to drop out at 17 super early.
No, but I mean, dude, it did you good.
It worked out.
It worked.
I don't regret it. If I could do it again, I would do it again. But yeah, I definitely don't have the advice to most people to just be like, yeah, if you don't want to go to college, just drop out. Like I was so locked in on starting to work. I wanted to skip all of college and just get to work. That was kind of like my mindset. And I think that was a big part of what pushed me to make the decision to drop out so soon.
Right.
And also I wasn't aware that there were sound design programs at other schools. Money was such a big part of my mindset growing up, not as in like I want to make a lot of money, but like I remember having stressful times when I was younger with money, like with my family. So it was always at the forefront where I didn't want to go out of state or go to like a big school that was going to put me 6 figures in debt, because I had done the research about audio. I knew that it's a career that you can make decent money after many, many years. And if you do really, really well, and at the start, you typically don't make very much money. So I was always very hesitant to like look at NYU and like the Tisch School of Music and, you know, these big programs. I just thought like, I don't want what comes with it as far as the debt and everything else. So I had a very like localized brain where I just wanted to kind of like find a school in Florida, get the experience and prove my worth through my work, not necessarily the school that I went to. So that was kind of like my mindset. And I do think it helped because I was a full-time studio engineer when I think I literally had like just turned 19.
Which is insane.
Yeah. And I was lucky. Like the whole situation where I met the right person who coincidentally worked at my school and was the program director and like helped me get in and helped me cut the line, so to speak. Like that's not a process most people are going to be lucky enough to have themselves. And like, I'm super fortunate and lucky for that.
Totally.
But yeah, I just remember being like 19 and all my friends are like starting their sophomore year in college and like they're learning about audio. And I was like doing the thing and I felt super underqualified. Like I did not feel ready to be in these sessions. Every single time I was like in the fire. It was just a very stressful period of time. And like part of me thinks, I wonder if I went back to school, if I got a bachelor's degree in audio engineering and I went to like a big university to study audio, would that have prepared me more? But at the same time, like I learned to fail early and fail often, kind of like we were talking about earlier. And I just think that's so important. Like every time you think you make a mistake or you fail, it's really just kind of informing your approach in the future. So I'm super grateful for all of that stuff. And I'm really happy that I got it out of my system early and I knew and figured out what I wanted to do when I was a little bit older. Because I think what you think you want to do for the rest of your life kind of changes as you start doing things.
Yeah.
You know, like you were interested in audio. You mentioned you learned about the studio engineering stuff and you didn't really want to deal with like the egos of working with people in bands. And like, I experienced that too. When I was in the studio, I met a lot of people where I was like, holy shit, I do not want to do this for the next 40 years and like have to chase people down for payments. And
yeah.
It was just a lot. So I think every kind of step of the journey informs your approach for the future.
Totally. And like same with the film stuff. Like I kind of had a similar experience working with some directors where, especially like younger, you know, students and things like that, where they think they know everything and the ego kind of gets in the way of the project and what you know to be like good choices audio wise. But I mean, I'm really good at cleaning dialogue now, like really good. Because some of these location recordings I would get, there's no money for ADR. There's no reshoot. There's no nothing. This is a capstone project that is due in a week, and you got to make it sound good. And, so like there's always some benefit, even if it's not exactly what you're looking for. But I mean, I definitely relate to the money thing. Like, I did not want student loans, and I'm so glad I didn't take any out. And I'm glad I took really long time to get through college just to get my associate's degree, because in the end, I don't think that really makes much of a difference at all, at least in my story, getting my foot in the door. Like, it's all about the people that I've met. It's all about the quality of my work and the demo reel that I present. And as you go, the more experience in the games you've worked on, the kind of accolades that you collect just working, like that's kind of how I figure it makes the most sense to get your foot in the door in this industry. But I'm not saying don't go to school either. I learned a lot of good things in school. I got my internship from going to school. I think there's a benefit to it, but I do not think it's like a necessity these days. A lot of jobs, they want a bachelor's degree or equal work experience, So however you can get your experience and meet more people, whether it's through game jams or just talking to people on Twitter, LinkedIn, just Discord. There's a lot of cool Discord channels for sound design. Like, it's all very worth it just to put yourself out there and be willing to revise what you're working on, be open to feedback. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's just a complicated game we found ourselves in. And, it can be hard. Like right now, you're in between jobs and, it's rough out there with the layoffs and everything. But I mean, I can't think of anything else I'd want to be doing career-wise.
I feel the same way. Like, as brutal as it is right now, we've spoken about this offline many times. I feel like I have more experience than I've ever had, more credits than I've ever had. I feel more prepared than I've ever been. And I'm having a harder time finding work now as we speak in September of 2024 than I did when I was like making the pivot initially back in, what was it, end of 2020. Like, there was a period of time where the bubble was expanding a lot, and it seemed like there were more and more sound design opportunities, and we're kind of seeing a point in the industry where there's a lot of layoffs. There's a lot of projects getting canceled or having the plugs pulled pretty prematurely.
Yeah, Jesus, look at Concord.
Look at Concord. What was it out? Not even 2 weeks, over $200 million in development, and
10 days.
The plug just got pulled like that.
Yeah, and it's just, it's the state of affairs right now are pretty grim. But I do think that it's really shining a light onto the things that are wrong with the industry. And I do think that there's work being done trying to change it, which is very positive. That gives me hope. I don't think video games are ever going to go away,
Definitely not. No, yeah. And I mean, I don't know if it's still the case. I remember a big buzzword sort of statistic I always used to hear was that video games make more money than the music and film industries combined ×2. And if I had to guess, that's probably still the case and probably will continue to still be the case for years to come.
Yeah.
So I think the pendulum is going to swing back at some point. I mean, I'm already starting to see more audio jobs open up. I also think audio is in a very particular situation in the sense that there's a lot more outsourcing going on these days. A lot of development studios don't want the overhead of full-time audio folks if they know that a lot of the work they're doing may end up getting scrapped at the development process. I mean, I think there's always value in having audio people on the project from start to finish, but I think maybe some of the execs don't see it that way and they want to cut costs and bring audio in at the end or outsource audio entirely, and just different business models. And I think we have to figure out ways to adapt. And, that's a big part of why I was stoked when you asked me if I wanted to do this podcast with you, because while I've been looking for work, I'm taking on short little projects here and there, mixing some music, editing some VO for other games, making some sound effects libraries, and now we're doing this podcast. And I'm just happy that it all worked out, because had I been employed, maybe I would have reconsidered taking on more work and doing this,
Yeah.
So I think everything happens for a reason.
No, for sure, man. And like I said, like I just thought it would be fun. Like, I didn't even say this at the beginning of the podcast like I intended to, because I've never done a podcast before. But the whole goal of this was just to like meet more people in the industry and make more friends. Like there's all of these super interesting, super talented sound designers and composers, and I want to get to know more people. Like neither of us really live in like a hub for video games, so it's hard to network. And GDC is expensive. Like I still want to go
As hell.
but like I want to meet people in the meantime. So I thought this would be a really cool way to do it. And yeah, this was really cool. I learned a lot of stuff I didn't know about, your kind of journey into this. And I'm really excited to, meet more folks and, get to know their stories, because I'm almost positive that not two of them are the same.
Yeah, and it seems like everybody has, even if there's parallels kind of like with our own paths, they're still distinctly different. We grew up in different parts of the country. Like all of that factors in to, I think, the eventual path we take. And I'm sure everyone we talk to, whether they live in Canada or the UK or other parts of Western Europe or the US, like everyone's going to have their own story that's different. And I think games being as globalized as they are, it only makes sense that we talk to a globalized group of people and kind of hear their insights and their journeys as well. So yeah, I'm also really looking forward to the future of the podcast. And yeah, man, thanks for your time.